go ahead and get started here in just a quick second, and we will have an awesome conversation. Thanks so much for coming and participating this morning. I know that there's lots of things you could be doing on a lovely Saturday. It is Saturday, right? Wanted to just introduce myself. I'm Brian Wright. I'm the principal of Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative, and I am leading the team of consultants to help you all figure out the future of your city, where you want to go, helping you write the story together of your city for the future. And having these kind of discussions is so important. This is the meeting specifically related to housing and neighborhoods. That's the stated topic, but anything goes. So I see some familiar faces. I wonder, Beth, are you new to the group? Is this your first time?
Yes, I'm with Spin. We're a family shelter.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. I'll run around real quick and introduce you to the rest of my team who's here. I've got Jessica Beekler, who is, she is on your screen, but she's at the top of my screen. She's a planner. And I have Becky Timmons, who's somewhere on your screen waving, she's the project manager for our team. Trip Muldrow is our economist. He's there. Jarrah Smith is part of the City Explain team. City Explain is our partner in this project, and they are working on some of the more analytical side of things, looking at infrastructure and service and others as well, but that's one of their specialties. And then we've got city staff on. You guys want to introduce yourselves, or Chris, you want to introduce everybody real quick? You're muted still.
Yep, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking some time. Beautiful day. I think the other promise we ought to make ourselves is to get outside after these great conversations, because it's awesome. But we got a number of members of the city team representing lots of our disciplines of work here. Martin Livingston, you don't see his name, but he is at C.C. Woodson, I think. This morning, he is our head of community development. Natalia Rosario is in our planning department. Kathy Hill in community relations. Let's see, I see Marshall, she's in our fire department. Just scanning the list, but Christopher George is in communications, leads those efforts. And so we've got a good team here, but our most important request from city staff is that you guys speak candidly and let us know what you think. We appreciate your time.
Yeah. Don't hold back, because we're really counting on you, even more so than city staff. We're counting on you to tell us about your city and what we need to know, because we certainly are not experts. We're not from around there. So let me pull up a couple of slides here real quick, just to run through some thoughts for you guys, some things we've heard and learned. Let me share my screen. All right, can you see that? Can you see my screen? Anybody? Can you hear my voice?
Yes, we hear you.
Yes,
and we can see it too.
Okay, great. Sorry. So some things to go over today: housing opportunity, availability and preferences and choice, affordability and displacement. Looking at, you're a city of neighborhoods, and so, thinking about how neighborhood structure of the city informs a plan. Looking at different types of housing. If it's rented or home ownership, a lot of times that comes up and is meaningful to some people. Design and character of what housing looks like in the city. Also homelessness, safety and resiliency come into play as well. And then, how do you plan a city for the current residents and also think about the future residents and make decisions that work for both of those different groups. We just did introductions, so we'll skip that. And what we've heard so far, there's another person in the waiting room. I'll let them in. If you can afford to live downtown, you can afford to drive for food. So that's an interesting comment we heard. Build a tiny house community. We heard people say don't gentrify and drive families away who give the city its character and history. People talked about revitalizing our neighborhoods, don't tear them down. We heard people say that there's some gentrification and displacement going on near downtown, and people want to add groceries and amenities in neighborhoods where people can't afford to drive or don't have access to a vehicle. And then we've heard about people being interested in denser or smaller infill housing. So kind of working on empty lots or areas that have maybe have development already, but lend themselves to being redeveloped. So those were the topics that some things we've heard and some things that we want to cover today. So it's a pretty free-form conversation, as always. What do we need to know about housing?
Okay, so this is Beth from Spin. I deal with people that fall far below the poverty line and homeless, and trying to find affordable, free of code violation housing is extremely difficult here. I deal mostly with, when I'm talking with the chronic homeless, we're talking if there's an income, it's mainly disability. So you're talking $750 a month. So trying to find something in the $400 a month range is really difficult. That is, standard and a decent place to live. And I agree about the areas of I'll talk about behind the Beacon area. Where do they go grocery shopping? Outside of convenience stores. So.
Yeah. Hey, Beth, I've got a question for you. I'm really glad you're here to have somebody who's, a subject matter expert and a local one as well. So the $750 a month or $400 a month that you mentioned, that is for people who are homeless would have access to that amount of money?
Yes, that would be the chronic homeless. If they can get any type of income, a lot of it is, Social Security. And so, yes, that would definitely be the chronic homeless. And thanks to Natalia for cluing me in on this meeting today. So I want to give Natalia the heads up on that.
Great.
And as far as our homeless families, because they normally generate at least minimum wage income. We used to say no more than $600 a month, but we've upped that to about $700. And then for the Spin families, we have an internal housing program, so we can help out with a couple, like 6 months of partial rental subsidy, which is what helps. But, that's just a small pocket of families. And then what we deal with too is the eviction rates. And I just actually wrote a grant yesterday, so I'm like full of a lot of these statistics. But
ooh, can you send it to us?
They're actually from Martin Livingston. So
okay, good. Well, we've got it then. Thank you.
He did a great presentation a couple of years ago that I always refer to. But we have more renters than owners. And those renters in the city or county, it's a lot more than 30% of their income to pay their rent. So those are the struggles that we face.
Okay, great. Do you have an idea of what the homeless population is right now in the city? Trip may already know that data point, but do you know, Beth?
Well, I'll get off my soapbox on that one. According to the point in time count of this year, which is in January, it's about 267. But you have to understand that's a HUD thing, and their definition of homelessness is different than what probably we all think of homelessness is. And I lead that count for Cherokee, Union, and Spartanburg, and so there is no way that we can find people, because some of them truly are off the grid, and that's what they choose. For the last 8 or so years that I've been doing this, I think one year Union County had 4 homeless people, but normally they don't have any homeless people, which
Beth,
doesn't make sense.
Beth, this is Trip. I so appreciate you making that point. Is that the count that you're doing? We deal with this everywhere, and I'm chuckling because it's serious. I mean, it's not funny. It's serious. That is an undercount, a massive undercount.
Yeah.
And do you know? And I've got the consolidated plan and the housing market study that I'm kind of working my way through. And I'm sure there's an impediments to fair housing document that Martin has. But one of the things I found in other communities is schools were able to give a little more indicator, because they know who's attending homeless children, and homeless children is a little different,
Yes.
they may be couch surfing. Is there any thing that you may recommend that I look at that may help expand the definition?
So under the school definition of children, they fall under the McKinney-Vento. I don't know if you're familiar with McKinney-Vento Act, but so they follow. So doubling up and living in hotels, which is interesting because it's a HUD thing as well, is
Right.
okay for school age children, but it's not okay for adults. And so,
Right.
but I would contact District 7, McKinney-Vento liaison Colin is a plethora of knowledge on that. I do know, I think last school year, prior to COVID, they were close to have already identified it. I know it was over 500
Okay.
homeless students.
Right.
But I can give you, I'll put Colin's number and information in the chat. He's really, and he works really well with all the other district liaisons.
Thanks, Beth. I really appreciate that. That's a huge help.
Beth, we're fortunate to get to work all over the country and see solutions that people are implementing, and what's working and what's not. And do you have any of sort of your favorite places who you think are doing the best job at dealing with and addressing issues around homelessness? Like any cities or communities or programs you want to point us to?
I know there was a trip, and I missed it last year or a couple years ago in Fort Worth that was doing really well with their what they were doing with the homeless population. I don't know if anybody on the call went on that trip. I know in a couple of weeks, some of my board members and I are going up to the urban ministries in Charlotte. But one of the things that I do know is that the cities that have had a lot of success were able to get lots of money from the city. But those were much larger cities than Spartanburg. So there's no way anyone can expect the city of Spartanburg to give $50 million. We would like it, Chris.
Yeah.
So, Greenville does an okay job. In Tennessee, there was, they did 100,000 homes. Mr. Connolly was involved in that. But from what I understood, the operation in Fort Worth went really, really well.
Got it. And it just occurred to me that I said we already did introductions a minute ago, but it was just the consultant team and the city staff who are the least important people on this call. So my apologies. Let's go through and introduce ourselves if you want to, and if haven't just gotten out of the bed, or you're still in the bed and you don't want to, that's fine. But if you could turn on your cameras so we can all see each other, but we won't hold it against you if you don't. So I'll go around the group here and call on people. If you could just tell us your name and why you decided to come this morning. So we just heard from Beth, and she told us who she is. So we have Ruth Littlejohn.
Yes, and I'm not going to turn on my camera. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear
Because
you.
I just finished a neighborhood cleanup, so I'm not turning on my camera.
All right. So you tell us who you are, Ruth.
Oh, I'm
What
sorry.
made you decide to come today?
I represent City Council District 3.
Awesome. And Abigail.
Hi, I'm Abigail Hoffman. I work with In the Berg. It's a morning email newsletter between Spartanburg Herald Journal and One Spartanburg Inc.
Thank you. And Brad.
Hi, I'm Brad Steinecke. I'm here just in a sort of citizen capacity, but I work at the library and serve on the city's Historic Architecture Review Board.
Great, thank you. And we've got Kathy.
Hey, I'm Kathy Hill. I'm the Community Relations Manager, and I work with the neighborhoods.
Wonderful. Marshall. You're muted. Can you unmute? There you go. All right, try again. Oh, we still can't hear you. That's weird. It says you're unmuted. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello? All right, well, hey, how's it going? We can't hear you, but that's all right. Hopefully we'll get that figured out, because I know you're going to have an amazing idea to share with us. Moses. Moses Jenkins.
Can you hear me?
Here we go. Yep.
Perfect. I'm Moses Jenkins, sheriff candidate and community activist.
Great. Thanks for being here. Ricky Fields.
Hello, guys. My name is Ricky Fields. I'm running for County Council District 1, but I'm also here at a citizen capacity to kind of learn what I can do to assist in making Spartanburg better.
Great. Rodris Gillum.
Hey, my name is Rodriguez. I also go by the Mad Artist. I'm here as a citizen, and I also just care a lot about my community. So I just want to find ways on how to implement leadership in the community, and then also promote change. But I did have a question. I want to know what the city defines as homelessness. I want the definition on how they defined it.
Sure. Chris, Tripp, anybody want to take that?
Well, and Martin may want to chime in too. There are, I'm not sure the city itself has an official definition. We work closely with HUD, and the federal government has definitions for homelessness that relate to certain funding streams and programs and grants and that kind of thing. So when engaging with them, we engage by their terms. And then as we work with Beth and other community partners that are involved in the direct service, they may have ways in which they attack the problem. But because of the fact typically that we don't have specific definitions for financial programs that the city is involved in, we tend to rely on the way HUD defines it.
That's correct. And Beth can probably add more to that information, but I think the persons that are considered homeless is 7 days. If you're living on the street for 7 days, you're considered homeless by the federal definition. If you're on a couch in someone's house on day 7, you're not considered homeless by the federal definition, which presents a lot of challenges for families locally.
Gotcha. Thank you. Let's see who else do we have.
I'll just say sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, we're almost done with the intros. We'll get back into the meat of it here. Stephen.
Hey, Stephen Sykes. Just here as a citizen and someone who may be looking for a new place to live in the city pretty shortly.
Great. Susan. You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Me. Hey, sorry, I was late to the meeting, so I'm not really sure what else happened, but I live in Hampton Heights and I'm just here as an interested resident.
All right. You haven't missed much yet. We're just doing introductions, and I went through a few things that we've heard so far about housing. So we're about to get started with just queue up questions and comments and discussion. So Tony Sutton.
Tony Sutton, community advocate. I am also the president of South Converse Neighborhood Association.
Okay, great. And then I also missed a couple of my team members, I think. So Chauncey Lundy is here on the Zoom with us. Chauncey is our specialist for equity planning. So hey Chauncey, helping to make sure that all the things that we're doing and thinking about, since this is a comprehensive plan, and it has to have all this normal stuff that comprehensive plan has in it. But we also, since equity is the foundation of this plan, want to make sure that, we are really diligent in making sure that everything we do is viewed through that lens, and we don't miss any opportunities to make things more equitable through policies and decisions that are being made. And then also Matt Newcaster was on. Matt is with, I mentioned, City Explained and with JERA, be working on the analytical side of things. So I don't think I missed anybody, but if I did, unmute yourself and just jump in and say hello. Let's see. All right, so homelessness, and it's interesting, the housing meetings often start with homelessness because it certainly is a pressing issue, and it's one of those things that's unique in a comprehensive plan because even though equity is the foundation of this plan, we are trying to think about making sure there's something for everybody at all income levels, from the highest to those in the most need. But it's there are certain things that happen when we discuss different issues and aspects of the city where you think, okay, well, how do we even worry about something like that seems like it's just for fun rather than something that is crucial to someone's life, like having a place to live. And so we have to kind of jump back and forth between things that are very important from a human perspective, sort of that have a weight and a heaviness to them that we need to address, and then also while still being aspirational and looking for the whimsy and the joy and all of that. And so I think that actually a good example of something that bridges all of that is art. It's art is something that can be enjoyed by everyone. Now, public art is an interesting thing because while someone, let's say, if you are struggling with, having consistent housing, and you're trying to work multiple jobs or whatever the case may be, you may not have time to go to an art gallery or something, or may not even feel, as we heard yesterday in some of the discussions, you may not even feel like that an art gallery is a place for you. But public art, art that is out, sculpture or murals or even the arts, crosswalks like we talked about, are accessible and enjoyable to everyone. And so, how can we find things that are meaningful to everyone, but then also having specific solutions to address the hard things like homelessness or poverty, et cetera. So just as a word of just a request that we kind of jump back and forth between those things, not art specifically, but hard things to figure out and things that are still fun and light. Tamika, I didn't have you introduce yourself. Sorry.
I've been at too many of these meetings. It's okay.
Well, we got some new people. That's why.
I'm Tamika Thompson. I am here also on a citizen capacity. I am a parent. I really care about the community. My family has been here for decades. I'm majorly here at this meeting because I have older, wiser family members who live in Forest Park who I'm concerned about how their current affordable living situation is going to go.
Great. And one more on the phone whose name I can't see. You introduce yourself.
Oh, that may be me.
Yes. Hi.
I'm Rebecca Farr. I'm coming as a citizen, and my husband and I live in Boiling Springs, but we just purchased an apartment downtown. And so we're just very interested in, what all's going on.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Okay. So where were we? So we were talking about homelessness. Is there more to add about homelessness? I mean, there's always more to add about it. Marshall. You have something?
Good morning. I think I finally got it fixed.
Hey.
Can you hear me? Yes. Good morning.
Yes, we can.
Yes. Sorry, technical difficulties. My name is Marshall Hines. I'm actually an employee for the city. I work in the Spartanburg Fire Department. I'm their administrative assistant. But I also live in the city. I live in Park Hills. And I'm a transplant. I'm originally from the Pittsburgh area. And I married in this area probably 5 or 10 years ago. And so when we made from renting to buying, we actually lived in Greer. And we moved to Spartanburg in particular because we were priced out of Greer and Greenville. I obviously love the community now. That was one of the things that brought me and my husband and our family to this area. So I wanted to make sure that opportunity is built for people.
Great. Thank you. All right, let's keep the conversation going. Trip, what do you got?
Well, I think I want to throw one on the table. I do not want to leave anything that's been talked about. Certainly, we can bring it back up. One of the things I find interesting, and Marshall just hit on this with her comment, is when I was looking at the numbers and I had to sort of do my little geekdom here. In South Carolina, our cities don't have a real strong ability to annex. So our cities remain relatively small compared to the counties that surround them. And it was notable in Spartanburg that the median housing value is lower than that of the county. When you look at Greer City, when you look at Greenville City, the median housing values in the cities are way higher than the county. So it's like a reverse pressure that's happening. I'd be curious to know, y'all's, and so I'm going to throw that comment out there on like mobility versus like living in the city. Y'all have such strong neighborhoods, and I'd love to hear comments about that and sort of that pride of living in Spartanburg City. And then the corollary comment to that would be, how fluid is that, if that makes sense? So, if you live in an adjacent community or, unincorporated Spartanburg County, that association with the city, what's that fluid, how does that feel for you all? And I'd just love to get a feeling for that on affordability. I live in the city, kind of thing. I live in Greenville County, used to live in the city, but I couldn't afford to move back to the city right now, just to give you an example.
Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Well, even though I'm city staff, I think I can maybe give a little bit of reflection on that because I grew up mostly in Woodruff and only moved to the city like 2 years ago, like city proper, even though I've been working for the city and been around the city since undergraduate. So at least in my mind, even when I was living out in Woodruff, which is like a 20-minute drive down 221 to get to the city, everything that I was trying to get to was actually in city limits. So like, even if you just had to go to Walmart, I was driving down to come to the city. And I mean, most of the smaller cities in the county don't have a whole lot going on in terms of a downtown core. Some of them are working on that and doing well, but generally the things to do for younger people where they are found, they're found in the city. So I do see it as kind of like the cultural heart of the county. And we do know that people come and recreate and work and buy things here from all over the county. So we actually serve a whole lot more than just the people in our footprint. I mean, that's maybe that can help get some people's juices flowing.
Hi, this is Ruth Littlejohn speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes, Councilwoman. Thank you.
Yes, this is my first time living in a city. You know, I've always lived in the county or the country. And being here, you know, things are so convenient because you can walk and you don't have to drive. You know, you can just get out and you can get on the sidewalks, or you can walk on the trails, and we're so convenient. Got the schools, you can walk to the schools, or you can walk to church, the Y, you know, you have so many amenities right here. And I am fortunate and I feel blessed to be here, and you have close neighbors. You know, you don't have to get in your car or to drive to go and see your neighbor. And I really do appreciate being here. And we have good neighbors, and we have people who want the best. However, I would like to see more people being involved, because I believe that if we could get more people involved, we could be a great city, because I love the city of Spartanburg. But I am not sure why we are missing a generation of people who do not want to be involved. And so that's something that we're going to have to work on. And then by doing that, I believe that we will become a great city. I hope what I said made some sense. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
I would like to add, yeah, I think the city's cool, but as far as affordability, we're nowhere near where we need to be. A lot of these apartment complexes are asking for 3 times the income to actually be verified to be in a home. You have a lot of people that's being underpaid. And you know, the reason why we don't have a lot of involvement from the generation is because they're stuck at a lot of these plants working consistently day on day, only getting maybe 24 hours to themselves. So them having more involvement in what's going on in the city is impossible, because they have a lot of their time tied up in working in these plants. And that's something that's consistently brought to South Carolina and in this area. And that's a lot of the only choices that a lot of them have. And as far as living in the actual city downtown, it's not affordable for the common person that's here. And as far as like, what are they being paid? If they're being paid not even minimum wage, how can they afford to live downtown in the city? And a lot of the people that lived in the city got pushed out of the city because they made it unaffordable. And that is a consistent issue. And if I even wanted to live in downtown, it wouldn't be possible. And there's a lot of these high rises that are being built, and there's more of these lofts that are being built. And people can't live in them. They can't live in them. And most of them are empty. And that is an issue. Why are these places empty? And why are there people still living on the side of the street when we have so many abandoned buildings, even in our downtown? So those are the issues that I see. And I feel like those are the things we really need to be talking about. Because yes, mobility as far as walking and getting to certain things, yeah, that's great and all. But who can actually afford to be downtown and live here? And that's what we really need to talk. That's what we really need to talk about. And a lot of these apartment complexes or the housings, they, even during COVID, they're still getting really strict on people of missing, maybe they're a day or two late on their rent or so. They're already sending out eviction notices if that continues to happen. And I know a lot of these places are owned privately, but there has to be some type of control where they have to be humane still and give people the opportunity to, during this time, especially since it is a very difficult time and a lot of people are still unemployed. So there are so many issues that need to be analyzed, and we really need to redefine what homelessness is.
Yeah, got it. Thank you so much.
Okay, let me comment on that. Whoever that was speaking, who was that was speaking, because I didn't get his name?
The Mad Artist.
Okay, let me say this. Okay, I agree with everything that he said, because I was more focused on the positive side because I had come from the country, because being in the city. He is right, because we have a lack of housing in the city and it's not affordable, for people who are making less than $15 an hour. Now that's disgraceful, because I think about that, because it makes me sick at the stomach to think that we have people here who are out there working and they are essential workers and they are making less than $15 an hour. Now that really bothers me. And we have a lack of transportation. However, we are working on that because the city has just expanded the bus routes, going out near the factories and things like that. And we have a lack of growth, because especially on the south side of town, because this used to be a booming community. Okay, and we do not have growth, coming in this direction now. I am so excited about the laundromat that we got. And some people have said to me, why are you so excited about a laundromat? It's just a laundromat. Okay, that's the first new structure that has come out of the ground on the south side of town in many years. I am excited about that, and I'm grateful to the people who have brought it here. And then we have a lot of homelessness here. We have people, I don't know where they're all coming from, but it doesn't matter. I've been told that there are people from Greenville that are buying their people a one-way ticket, sending them to Spartanburg, the same thing, from different counties. We don't know if that's true or not. There's no way to back that up. But we do have a lot of homelessness, and I'm concerned that it's going to get worse, because in my district, we have a lot of rentals, mostly through the housing authority. And I am concerned, that once this COVID, once the cover is turned back, we are going to see a lot of evictions here, and it's going to affect a lot of residents in my district. And that concerns me. So we have a lot of concerns, because I did express my positives, because I'm just excited about being in the city. But we do have so many things, we talk about these things and we are working on these things, and I admire our city manager and Martin and Chris and all of them, because they are working all the time. And we are working with them to make things better. But there is so much that we can do. We need We need participation, you know, from the residents. We need participation from everybody who can do something. We need hands on board.
Yeah, and actually that reminds me of of an idea, or just an idea popped in my head. Natalia, when we're, you know, as we're kind of always tweaking and fine tuning and adjusting our process and our outreach and input opportunities, I'm wondering, and I know it's hard with factories because they have, you know, have to keep things moving and all that, but I wonder if there's a way that we could do some input at the job, you know, so people, and, you know, they actually, you know, get a break to go give some input on the future or whatever. You know, something you need to coordinate with the companies, but might be an idea to think about.
So are we speaking
Yeah,
candidly?
You're touching.
Yes,
Speak
please.
candidly.
Speak candidly.
Okay. One of the reasons that I showed up particularly for this meeting is because there was a conversation that took place on the Planning Commission meeting that said that there was no opposition to the Mary H. Wright project that is currently going on. And I would like to know how the city defines opposition, since that is not, we've had newspaper articles, we've had media present. There's been several of us who have spoken at city council. So I'm just trying to figure out how we define opposition. And because I think one of the things, you know, we're talking about participation, it often feels like when people participate, there's pushback to their participation. If they do not meet a certain criteria, if they're not a part of a certain organization, if they are not friendly with certain people within the city, their voices get silenced, or they find themselves on the tail ends of special emails from people who are supposed to be having their back. So,
To me, what project was that?
the Mary H. Wright project.
Okay.
It was stated that there was no pushback, no opposition, and that is not the case.
So I can probably speak to that issue. We held a planning commission meeting in which we discussed the Mary H. Wright rezoning. So there was several comments that were made, and there was a comment that was made that there is many opposition to the rezoning. But we only had probably one or two speakers that was opposed to the rezoning of the property. Now, I've had conversations with other planning commission members to try to get an understanding of the opposition to the Mary H. Wright property. And so we'll express that at the council meeting on November 9th. And certainly anyone can come and speak on being for, support for, or opposed to the Mary H. Wright rezoning. But the Planning Commission can only look at those 4 or 5 items that we listed in that presentation. A lot of the opposition that we heard was about the use of the property for institutional use. Right now, the rezoning request is for residential. And then we also heard opposition for making sure that the building remains as it is as a structure. And the developer is planning to actually make repairs to the property as well. But we do want to hear both sides at every meeting. We want to hear both sides at the Planning Commission or the council meeting. And that's an opportunity for folks to come out and speak on the issue.
Got it. So it sounds like it's more accurate to say, Tamika, that not that there's no opposition, but the opposition that came to present their point of view was a limited group, is maybe a more accurate way to say it, and may not even reflect everybody who is in opposition, who's you know, at home and opposing it. Do you have some other ideas about what should happen with the property?
There's several people that it's the thing with the property is there's the neighbors and family members that live over there. Everyone has different ideas, but that property, you know, it's not that nobody wants it to not be redeveloped. It's how it's happening. And a lot of people felt like they were left out of the conversation because it's, you know, my uncle says, you know, he felt like it was the same 30, 20 people having the conversation about that property and not an inclusiveness of everyone within that neighborhood. So that's part of it. But, you know, when you present things, so one of the things that has constantly come up in some of the other community meetings that I've been in is people have said multiple times, even people who have formerly worked for the city or formerly been involved with things for the city or the chamber or however, they have said that they don't feel like they can be honest without some kind of backlash concerning their job or however it may be. There's a lot of pushback if you speak up. So people feel at this stage, why bother to come to a city council meeting? They're just going to shut it down. Why bother to write anybody? They're not going to respond. Why bother to call anyone because they're not answering phone calls? It's just, when you present, and I've had this happen actually recently, had a conversation with someone that is working in city capacity, and they basically, rather than actively listen to what was being said at the table, they listed all these great things the city is doing, which is great, and that's fine. But if you don't take in your citizens' concerns and they're telling you that these things that you are doing might be beneficial on paper, but they are not applying to their real life, you need to be able to re-examine that. And that's a lot of we're bumping heads here and it's not being talked about. We just keep having these conversations about the great things the city is doing, and it makes the citizens feel like their voices are silenced.
Got it. So it sounds like it's the biggest concern is really a process kind of thing. You know, for me as Mr. Planapalooza, who's all about everybody come and let's talk and sit down and give me all your ideas before we even start thinking about anything. That's always hard for me when I get to town and there's a process problem and people are frustrated because it is so easily dealt with typically if you just bring people to the table from the beginning. But a lot of times too, I mean, we'll go through this whole week of Planapalooza. We'll have spent, you know, staff and city and us have spent, you know, you wouldn't believe how many hours trying to get the word out. And there'll be somebody who comes up and says at the end of this, well, you know, they had this secret Planapalooza meeting and no one told me. And so it's definitely hard. But while I've got you here and while we have this week, and, you know, a lot of times, you notice I'm not asking anybody from the city what they think about this or what, you know, I'm always, people are like, you know, you're just, you know, working for the city, so you're saying what they think. And honestly, until you mention this, I don't even know about the controversies. I'm Googling it as we're talking. I'm looking on the aerial photographs to see where the school is. And so I don't know how far down the road this whole situation is or whatever, but you know, we're here at Planapalooza planning, and there are things that we're going to be, you know, areas where we're drawing plans and having ideas that we don't control that may even have new construction on them. And so, you know, I'll ask again, you don't have to answer right now, but hopefully while we're doing this Planapalooza this week, and the sooner the better, it'd be awesome if you do have some ideas, or your uncle or your, you know, uncle's friends or whomever has some ideas about what they'd like to see. Let's go ahead and take that right now, and Martin and everybody can have that when they're talking to Planning Commission upcoming. And we actually may have some ideas. You wouldn't believe, I mean, sometimes we've heard an issue going on. We said, oh, well, I have an idea. What about this? And, you know, when I started to say it, people were like, you know, what is this guy from out of town know? We've been fighting about this for, you know, 3 years or actually 30 years in one case. And we were able to come up with some ideas that everybody actually liked, and they changed course and where they're.
Well, I hope I'm not
so
putting Tony on the spot.
About not just the process, but.
Yeah, I'm hoping I'm not putting Tony on the spot, but she actually took the time to sit down with citizens, particularly in the Southside community, and get a list made of all the needs and asks that they have been discussing for some time, and get it put to paper. And I believe Chris and Mitch already have that list. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it is, it's public information. So.
Well, if we can make sure that gets to us, that would be great. Chris or Mitch or Tony, anybody.
Okay, can I comment when you finish? Okay, can I comment on this, please?
Sure.
Okay, this is Ruth Littlejohn, because here the Mary H. Wright building, which is in my district, and we have sent out notices for people to attend the meeting. And I would love for people to come out and express themselves, but they do not come. And I regret that they are not coming because of them feeling like they're not going to be heard, because they are invited. Everybody's invited to the meeting. Now, the Mary H. Wright, okay, that building has been standing vacant more than 5 years. It's filled with mold. It has environmental problems. Okay, the developer is going in and he has been working. I am hoping that he's going to close on that building because it does have a lot of problems. However, if he does not close on that building, okay, there's a strong possibility that it's going to stand for years to come, and it's going to have even more problems. And there's a possibility that it's going to have to be torn down if it is filled with too much mold and stuff. And nobody wants to come in and to work with that building. Now, right now, that developer got plans to leave the outside of that building intact. He's going to leave. Okay, that building will stay as it is. Gosh, at least on the front, gosh, in the sides, and he may have to do a little something on the back of that building that cannot be seen from the street. However, I don't think that he's going to make any adjustments at all on the outside of that building. However, we do not have anything on the south side of town for young professionals to move into. Because we have rents that are starting out here at $50 a month, including utilities. And we have got several apartments, low rent, and we have senior housing, low rent. But we do not have anything for young professionals. And we ask them, why don't you move to the south side of town? Because we have young professionals who are moving to Boiling Springs and out in the county, different parts of the city. The north side is just booming, and that was an area that used to be an eyesore. It is booming. The east, the west side of town, a lot of growth, but there is no growth here. And I'm concerned that if this developer walk away from this project, it's going to be a long time coming before we get another developer that's going to come back in. And plus, we are hoping to get a grocery store here. We are hoping to get a grocery store. If we get that grocery store, we're going to have someone to help support that grocery store. And that's why we need these young professionals who are wanting a nice place to move into. We are wanting them to move to this side of town because this used to be a booming, this used to just to be a wonderful side of town. You had a lot of growth here, or you had Black people here who were where your doctors, your lawyers, your teachers, this was the side of town that you wanted to live on if you were Black. And I know that some of the younger people would prefer me to say African American, but I got stuck. I stayed with Black when we were there. But anyway, I would like to see more growth, and I don't want this developer to walk away from this project. And the people who live here want this. Many of the people that I have spoken to and many of the people who are against it don't even pay city taxes, because some don't even live in the city, because some don't even live in the state. So, we want to see this side of town start building up again. And we want a grocery store.
Well, I think it goes back to kind of, in some ways, what you were saying before about the the reason why you're so excited about the laundromat, you know, it is investment in you know, in this area, which is exciting. It sounds like, but as with any development proposal, you know, it can be concerning to the neighborhood. And I think getting that feedback, Natalia tells me I've got the list of all the things that Tony put together and the group. And then I've also asked Natalia to send me the development proposal to look at that. And maybe even if the developer wanted to participate this week while we're here, we might be able to have a conversation about some ideas. But again, it sounds like the biggest
Can I
issue.
ask a question?
Yep.
I would like to know when they spoke with young professionals. At what point in the process young professionals were spoken with, and how they determined that young professionals needed housing on the South Side, because most of the people who were speaking in particular and then added to this list of ask and needs on the South Side, some of them were young professionals, and they specifically said, yes, we need this grocery store, but they are not interested in this particular apartment complex. Let me ask this, is everyone on the call familiar with exclusionary amenities? So
Yes.
you can't put up a sign that says no Black people. You can't put up a sign that says no people that don't speak English, but you can put amenities into a property that keeps people from moving into that area. So in a historically Black community, they're putting in and I may pronounce it wrong, a Bosch court, a Baki court in this apartment complex. Yes, thank you. And it's a historically Black community. Why is that going there? Who plays that here?
To follow up what Ms. Thompson is saying, as a young professional who makes well over $65,000 a year and pays 2 property taxes in the city of Spartanburg, I want you to know that it is pointless to put rent in an area for $1,500. It's also kind of false to say rent starts at $50 on the South Side, because of course housing authority is there. You have properties there that people own housing authority, but that takes years to get, and there's different requirements. I can't move to the South Side for $50 a month. But at the same time, I'm not going to pay $330,000 to move into a house on the South Side. I think the laundromat was a horrible idea because the people asked for a grocery store. As somebody who grew up on the South Side, it's a shame that kids' only option for healthy food or some kind of food is D-Tracks or the gas station, which is taxed so high by the owners that they're making a profit off of poor people. The laundromat may be great for some people, but in my opinion, if you gave people enough money to make a decent wage, they would be able to afford a washer and dryer. But the people ask for a grocery store and everybody wants to be excited about a laundromat that I'm pretty sure less than 20% of the community uses. The Marriage Right Project, like Ms. Thompson was saying, it's a slap in the face because it wasn't brought to the community. It was snuck in. And yes, I do get that the developers are going to have to go through a lot with the building or whatnot. But if you redesign that building and you put in $1,600 a unit apartments, even I, as someone who is a young professional who has a career, who makes a decent salary, I couldn't afford $1,600 on the South Side. What would make me want to come to the South Side of Spartanburg and pay for a $1,600 apartment when I can go 5 miles up the street to Boiling Springs or Westgate and get me a house with a backyard? So those lofts or whatever, the luxury apartment, those are not designed for African Americans and the people of that community, the young professionals. The young professionals do not want to pay $1,600 to live in the old Marriage Right. Now you're looking at $750, $800, $900, maybe $1,000, yes. But $1,600, $1,500, it's like departments downtown. Those are not designed for our people. And our community used to thrive because we had businesses and everything wasn't bought out. But when things are gentrified, it makes it harder to run business. And like someone mentioned earlier, you have these factories that come through and give people the basic necessities of life. Of course, a lot of these people are not attending these meetings because they don't like you guys spoke before, they don't think you're listening to them. Because at the end of the day, if you get up and you say, hey, we don't want luxury apartments over here, this is what we need, this is what we need. And then you look in the news and the news says, well, nobody pushed back on the Marriage Right Project. And you just saw a bunch of people, your friends, families, and communities pushing back. You literally are not listening. And then, to start off the conversation by saying, well, we have apartments and housing over here for $50, that's definitely miscued, because at the end of the day, that requires housing authority, that requires some people to have kids to be listed as homeless. That's not attracting people who make $45,000 to $65,000 to that neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you, Ricky. And one thing I'll say is to, coming to town as an outsider, and I'm like, oh, tell me about this, or tell me about that, or I heard that you guys were having discussions about this. Like, me not knowing stuff often, has the opportunity to, sort of have everybody have to discuss things that you have already discussed about, or things that you're passionate about. It's okay. And it sounds like this actually may be, not, the bulldozers aren't there and people aren't starting to do stuff just yet. So there may be room for discussion and opportunity now. But I do want to respond to a couple of things that you said, Ricky. And we hear this a lot when it comes to you said, well, the laundromat, we wanted a grocery store, we're getting a laundromat, and so people aren't listening. I think, one of the things that is important to note is when the city comes, or even a developer comes, if they do, and say, hey, what does the community want? What can we do for you? And you say, I want a grocery store. And the thing is that at the end of the day, the developer doesn't control whether or not a grocery store comes. The developer can build a grocery store, and the grocery store will decide whether or not it wants to come into a certain location. But the grocery store, and any retailer or endeavor for that matter, really all they care about is they get the data and the information about how many people live within a certain distance of a site, and what the income levels are, et cetera. And they make the decisions to come there or not. And so there isn't a way that the city or anyone can make a grocery store come, or even make a developer do a grocery store who's looking to do a development. So that's the first thing to think about, what we're going to do in this process, because we've heard over and over that there are, not just in this area, but others too, there's a lack of access to good and healthy food. And so what we're going to do is look at what are those criteria that the grocery store use to make the decisions to locate in a certain place, and then how can we make these neighborhoods and the city at large meet those criteria, or more desirable, be more desirable for them, so we can possibly encourage them or find a way to get them in. And then if we can't, if they really are just by the numbers, if we're not able to figure out a way to get the numbers where we want them, or they need them to be, then what are some other solutions for it? And we talked the other day about, going to a more, looking how people have always done groceries before we had big grocery stores, more neighborhood style markets, and smaller scale kind of things would be one way to look at it. So we're going to be working on that hard this week. The other thing that I wanted to ask about is, the idea that that every development that goes into a location is going to be exactly for and meet the needs and desires, or will be a place that people in the neighborhood will live. And so trying to think through that, we talk about often the idea of people buying up property, tearing down something, putting in something new that's not targeted towards people who live in the neighborhood, and now you've displaced people. In this case, based on what I see, it looks like you've got the school that's vacant and nobody's living at the school. So it's, in some ways that's a plus, that you're not displacing people in order to develop on a particular site. And we also know that the idea of mixed income throughout the city and throughout different neighborhoods gives really the best results for everybody at every income level. And so I wonder if in some ways there are, some positives and benefits to look at, saying, okay, well, there are, different income levels that aren't currently found in the neighborhood who are living here. And maybe we're able to, one, not only have, new people that we get to know because they live near us, now they're our neighbors that we might not have met otherwise, but we're able to now benefit and sort of capitalize on that. And maybe now obviously it's a small development, so this one little thing won't make a difference. But, when somebody's making a decision where to put a business, they say, oh yeah, well, there's not only is there the great existing neighborhood fabric and all the people that are here, but they've also got, the other clientele. And so now there's a broader market for whatever it is I'm selling. I think it goes in all kinds of ways, but all the points you made, Ricky, were well taken. I just want to make sure that we're thinking through it all, and we don't miss an opportunity about process.
The thing about that is that all the housing authority that start with the $50 rents, they've been converted to RAD. So those are private owners. We don't know the certainty of that. That could increase the homelessness if for some reason that one of the developers or the owners of those apartment complexes get in some kind of financial situation. We see it all the time. What would happen to those people that are living in those $50 apartments? Another thing, right up the street, probably like 5 minutes away, we have a house that sold for $15,000. It's now on the market for $335,000. So if we're going to talk about the displacement, the gentrification, let's have a real conversation about it. Let's have tell people the truth, because change is going to happen, but we need to prepare people for it. So we're going to develop Spartanburg to be big and beautiful, have all these attractive businesses and stuff. That's fine. I'm good. I'm happy for it. I'm a property owner, so I want that. But I don't want people to be homeless and have nowhere to go. We have to be honest about what's going on all the way around the board. We're going to look at everything. Let's look at what's happening with housing authority, how they don't have the funds to carry on like they used to. That's why the South Side has a low income. We have three or four apartments that are income based because of housing authority. We got to have discussions. We have to bring people to the table that live in these housing authority apartments. And for some reason, I don't even see those people in neighborhood meetings. I've talked to other people that said they don't have the residents of housing authority at their neighborhood meetings, because housing authority handle their own tenants. Okay, they don't know what's going on. What happens? You made a comment earlier, somebody said that we don't need a grocery store downtown because we live downtown. You can afford it. Not so. If you ask me, we're just bigger part of downtown in South Converse neighborhood as the downtown area. That's walking distance. You just heard us say with the rent starting off at $50. So how couldn't people can't afford cars? They can't even afford bus passes.
Yeah, no, that's all good for sure. And I think that as we look at and try to tackle these problems, that's one of the things that's great about a comprehensive plan. It's so much bigger than any one particular development, even, that we have the opportunity to, because we are focused on equity in all of the aspects of it. Each thing hopefully works towards improving everything for everybody. And so when we're looking at jobs, job creation, we're looking at entrepreneurship, looking at helping what can we do to help people start businesses, and then everything all the way, as we even started off this discussion talking about homelessness. It all is interrelated. Unfortunately, a comprehensive plan takes time for all the benefits to happen, but hopefully some of this stuff can happen sooner than later. I think I'm glad you mentioned the housing authority and some of the struggles that they're having. We'll be looking into that now. If you guys don't know too, I'm making a list here as we're talking, just jotting down notes. That's why I keep looking away. because I certainly don't have answers to all of these things yet. This is really for us to just pick your brains and learn kind of what the issues are, what kind of things we need to dial in and try to understand and hear what's going on. So thank you for that.
There's other communities who have regulated their private housing markets. They have encouraged resident controlled limited equity ownership. So the residents actually end up being able to buy these low income properties and stay there, because some people are going to be renters for the rest of their lives just because of the way their income is set up, the way that their lifestyles are set up. Everybody is not moving towards home ownership. And that needs to be something that's understood instead of trying to, and one of the biggest things is it's been made to seem like people don't want the South Side to develop, and that is not the case. What is the case is that people want the development without the displacement. We don't want to lose neighbors and culture and history because an apartment complex goes up. Like I said, my family's been here for decades. My uncle has lived in Forest Park for 70 plus years. He can't afford at his age to go get a second job to support living on the South Side if the rents start jumping up, if the property taxes start jumping up, if they start making it impossible for you to even just buy basic needs because the rates of everything starts skyrocketing. It's not just, it's not about whether or not Mary H. Wright has people in it now. It's about what these private owners are going to start doing when that money starts coming in. We've seen it in other cities time and time again. There's lots of cities. New Orleans is one of those cities where owners saw the benefit of Airbnbs and similar housing situations like it. And they got rid of their tenants within 30 days, sometimes less than that, put them out so they can make more money on Airbnb. What is going to stop any of these private renters on the South Side from doing that?
Yeah, that's a great point. And one thing that I always like to talk about too, or to mention or ask about is, when we have these conversations in different cities, the thing that always surprised me the first time it happened, and I hear it more and more often now, and I draw a parallel to when you're looking at rural areas, is, sometimes people say, oh, we have these beautiful farms that surround our city and we want to preserve them and it looks great. And then the person who owns the farm comes up to me after the meeting and says, oh no, we're not, that's my kid's inheritance. Like we've been holding on to that farm and we're planning on selling that farm and it's going to be developed. And if you make it where it can only ever be a farm, and then you just, really cause a financial hardship for us. And I similarly have had situations where we've been having these great discussions and talking about, keeping things affordable and not having displacement and gentrification happen, and someone will come up to me afterwards and say, my family has owned this house for generations, but we're totally happy to sell and benefit from the profit of that and move into another neighborhood, and that's okay. On the other hand, I've also heard people say, no, I don't care how much money it's worth. This is my home, my heart. We've been here for 5 generations. We're not selling no matter what. And so one thing that I always do want to make sure we're taking into consideration is beyond just the bigger picture conceptual discussion we're having about a displacement, is the specific desires of someone who does own a property, and we make sure that we're not depriving them of financial benefit that they've created by holding on to a property for generations. So it's that kind of stuff is what makes it so hard to figure out how to even address these things.
And I'm trying. I want to do more listening than talking, but I do want to just sort of confess and ask the group. If you read Color of Law or any of the other discussions about the equity impact of policies over time, one of the biggest quantifiable differences between African American households and white households over time has been wealth accumulation through property value increases. And for a variety of factors, that hasn't happened in African American communities as it has in other communities. And that has had a tremendous impact, a disparate impact that we are very concerned about when it comes to equity. But it also means, just to tie it back to the real complexity of the moment, just as I think it was Tamika's comments about rent rising. Well, the rent rising is part of that same economic force that allows owners of Southside properties or any other properties in a neighborhood that is becoming increasingly more desirable to build intergenerational wealth. So it's really very difficult to disconnect those two dynamics. And it's extraordinarily complex, and we need good, honest conversations like this. But I think it is very difficult to harness the positives of wealth creation through changes in different parts of a city over time from the other side of that coin that enables the wealth creation, which is increasing demand, which manifests in the form of higher rents. And they are just two sides of the same coin. We're on this great deep search for the best strategies to mitigate the adverse impact of the relationship between those forces, but we can't ignore them.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we're doing too, just so you all know, is we're not just trying to understand what the issues are and asking you all, well, what do you think? What are some solutions? We're actually looking around the country and around the world too at what is the latest and greatest thinking, what are best practices, what cities are being really successful in addressing affordability, homelessness, gentrification, whatever the issues are. We right away go and looking for what those best ideas are. So we'll come back to you all with some things to consider and have you guys sort of be able to give your feedback on it and help shoot holes in it and say, here's why I think that may be a problem. But it really is something that we all are tackling together, because there's no easy or good answers. So Tamika, I see you're unmuted. Do you have something else?
Yes. Do we currently have any displacement free zones in Spartanburg? And also, has your team encountered any of these zones in other communities?
No, I don't know about Spartanburg, but I haven't seen any displacement-free zones per se. I've seen lots of policies and things that are targeted towards making sure displacement doesn't happen. But I'm just making a note here to learn more about that. What are your thoughts on it? Does it, based on what you know about it, does it work? Does it make sense?
It looks like some of the tools actually work. One of them that comes into play is regulating the private housing market. So they kind of stipulate how high the rent can be in that particular section of town. And developers know that going in. So usually there's incentives for them to keep the rent controlled so it's affordable. And the incentives are for years, not for a short period of time.
So what I've seen, Tamika, is I haven't seen displacement-free zones similar to Brian, but I have seen policies. In what I have seen is for some new buildings or for existing buildings that may be in a place that they have very strong rent control, particularly if they received any funding from that state or that local jurisdiction towards the building of that property. If there was any money given from the city towards that building, or that they have to have some amount of affordable dwelling units that in them, mixed with market rate housing with them if it's new construction. I've also seen buildings where people have been displaced from their actual building, but they've moved them into the new building in a mix of market rate apartments as well. And and they have the same access to amenities as everyone else. It's not a necessary, it's no distinction, as it should not be. But just saying, I've seen those types of policies, and I've seen places, I can say in the South, I live in DC now, but I'm from Alabama. I can say in the South has much less stringent rent control, as I've seen in other places, that would kind of help with the displacement issue. And I know local jurisdictions, some may have stronger policies around that. I also wanted to ask a question to you, Tamika. One of the things that you mentioned was, with this new development, you don't even think that the amenities are catered to the people who currently live there. So even if there were this new apartment building coming to the neighborhood, it doesn't look like it supports the character of the existing neighborhood. And I think that's where I've seen people even take more issue, is that it doesn't seem like it even supports the character. So even if you were saying that young Black professionals were coming in, this doesn't even look like it supports what young Black professionals would even do in this neighborhood. And so I think that kind of seems like the issue, that even if you were bringing in something, it doesn't even look like it supports what's existing around there right now. Is that true?
That has been the feedback that we have specifically gotten from people, is that, that was some of the things that jumped out at them. Like, who's doing this in Spartanburg? We're not doing this. These are the things that we're doing. Why? It made people feel like the apartment was created without them in mind. They were not considered as possible occupants, period.
Got it.
Yeah. Well, and I talked about in maybe at the opening presentation or another one of the meetings about the idea of, how neighborhoods naturally grow and change and evolve over time, and the composition of who lives there is not the same over the course of the whole neighborhood's existence. And so I wonder, we're at a time now where we just know enough about being fair and being equitable, that we now kind of take a snapshot of today and say, here's what the composition of neighborhoods will be forevermore. And is that, and I'm always trying to look for unintended consequences or things that haven't been done before that are good, that are a new way of thinking that are a benefit. So I'm thinking about, if we're focused on equity and making sure that that the plan is really representative of that, and looking at new development that brings different types of people together, seems like it would be a beneficial thing, as long as you don't essentially completely flip the switch and then it becomes only what the new people are who are coming in. I remember that when they used to design the great parks like Central Park, for instance, they talked about there we go. They used to, one of the ideas about a place like Central Park was it was a common area that everybody from all walks of life and incomes and ages and abilities could all come together and have the opportunity to meet one another, to see each other, and maybe to make a friend that they wouldn't have known otherwise. And when I look at housing and how housing is set up today, neighborhoods are set up because they're usually really grouped by the cost of whatever you're buying, and they haven't been, except for historically, mixed in very well together. Different price points, you end up having people feel like they're other if they are in this neighborhood or that neighborhood or another neighborhood, but then on Monday morning they go to work all the people from all the different neighborhoods come together, and they all are friends, and they know each other, and they hang out at the water cooler and say, hey, how's it going, and whatever. And so one of the things that I want to challenge all of us to think through is, how do we allow for lots of different types of people to move into any kind of neighborhood, so that we have that better sort of cooperation and everybody coming together in that way. John, go for it.
I'm raising my hand because for whatever reason I can't find a raise hand feature on here, but I figured you get to see this. So Brian, I actually think that it's much more, sometimes it's just a blind spot for people. I don't necessarily know that people aren't open to new things. I think that sometimes when developers come into neighborhoods, whoever is working for them and drawing their sketches, sometimes don't consider the diversity of the area, even when it's black or white. Like, everyone who doesn't wear a suit and a tie to work, there are construction workers, there are police officers, there are people who work in different professions, landscapers, people who work in different professions. And sometimes, I even think about what this plan will ultimately look like. And if someone opened it up, would they feel like this comprehensive plan is for them? And that's going to be represented through, one, what's in the substance, but also in the aesthetics of the plan. And I think that sometimes there really is a blind spot. I've seen, buildings here in the district or plans for buildings, and we say, who lives in that neighborhood? Or tell people, you need to go back. That doesn't look like the diversity even of that neighborhood. Yes, there are people who are Hispanic, there are people who are white, there are people who are black. All these different people live there, but there aren't suit and tie people, in this. This is a very working class, a different type of working class neighborhood. And so just making sure that diversity is represented so that it isn't even just all one way either. So I think that, sometimes there's just more of a blind spot and people are not even considering it. And I do get what you're saying. Like, we should be open to, we should definitely be open to how do we all live and work together. But I also think that people don't want to feel like that's at the expense of them being excluded from the neighborhood too, from the neighborhood that they grew up and knew and loved.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one thing that I want to add on to that real quick is, if you would, right now it's like a one-story building, I guess. And so if they just develop the building as it is and just add units in there, it's a limited number of units. Would you, and this is just sort of thinking through, would you be interested in a development that had a broader range of price points, but was a different building? And so, you end up needing to, build more on the site, go a little higher, add some more units to be able to have that stratification of, the different price points for units. Or do people love the building so much that they would hate to see it go?
There's history tied to that building. And I don't think it's, it's at the current stage that it's at, how it's currently presented, it does not represent the people who have invested in that neighborhood for years. I think what, people have come up with great suggestions, but we've been told that they cannot be done. People have asked if it can be a trade school so that people would have different educational opportunities to have increase their income so they could live in a nicer place in Southside and build that up. And we were told that that's not a possibility. People asked if it could be kind of a mixed use situation where there could maybe be like a fresh food market in the front of the building and then apartments in the rest of it. And we didn't get a whole lot of, it basically has to be apartments and it can't be anything else. So that was hard to just take in. This how it constantly keeps being presented is this is the only option you guys have. Otherwise it's going to go. And when it feels more like you only have this or that, it's frustrating.
Yeah, I get it. No, for sure.
So
well, I sure hope they can come and talk to us this week.
Couple of comments. First, there was a couple of recommendations about retention and rent restrictions in the area. I think those are Those are good comments. I think we need to keep in mind that, and Tripp is on the line, he can probably speak to this better. In order for cities to do those kinds of things, we need state enabling legislation. Cities can't just do that. You need state law that allows the cities to do those kinds of things. Second, the Highland neighborhood recently completed their transformation plan for that neighborhood. It has several recommendations for anti-displacement and resident retention that are pretty good. And again, it has 2 or 3 recommendations that require state enabling legislation. The city can't just go out and do those kinds of things. And I keep hearing that there's some ideas about the reuse of Mary H. Wright building. There was one question at a community meeting about turning the site into a restaurant and mixed use. The challenge with the GID zoning, it has to be institutional. A trade school could work, but something like a restaurant or mixed use in a GID zone probably could not work. Again, that would require planning commission approval, but there are certain things that can work in the GID zoning, which it is now, and certain things that cannot. Residential could work because of the surrounding residential, but GID itself also that site can remain GID because it is, which means general institutional. And there've been some discussion about doing a trade school, but that just didn't occur. For one reason or another, I don't know why, but it just didn't occur.
Well, and Mark makes some good points about the regulatory environment, but I want to make an attempt, and it may prove unsatisfactory, but I want to make an attempt to address Tamika's broader concern, as I heard it, about not feeling heard about these kind of things. The unavoidable fact of the matter is the city doesn't own the building, and we've spent a lot of time talking about this one building, and I think maybe there's some benefits to talking about it as a case study. But I think the real takeaway for this planning process needs to be that things like whether or not there are trade school programs at the level they need to be and where they need to be planned out forward in advance. That's why we're doing the comp plan process, is to look at community needs and set goals for them. It is not often a question of whether there's validity to the desire that is expressed. It's the unavoidable reality of the world we work in is one of limited resources, and we have to set priorities with those limited resources as a community, and this is one of the best processes that exist for doing it, is the long-term comprehensive planning process. So the real straight answer for why there's not trade school programming being actively considered for Mary H. Wright is that nobody's been working on that in the community. I mean, the community college folks could come to a meeting, they could tell you what they offer in terms of trade school programming, but it's going to have to be dealt with at the level that, at the population level where it can work. That may mean that we end up looking for a site for something like that in the South Side. It may mean that, that the profile of folks who would be potential beneficiaries and users of that and the facility that it would best fit in and therefore be most economically viable in wouldn't be a vacant former school that's owned by a corporation in Ohio. I mean, it's not about wanting to there's nobody on this call, and there's nobody that's put in the hours and hours and hours and hours of trying to develop that wants anyone to feel unheard. We just want to be able to execute. And that's why this comp plan is so important. We need to express our priorities, put them down on paper, and actively work each element of them so that there is clarity and transparency on who's working on what and why and what the goals are.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just as an outsider, and it's one of my favorite parts about being an outsider. People say, well, what do you know about our community? I say, not much, but I can tell you what it's like elsewhere too. And a lot of times, people will say, oh, we've got this issue or that issue going on in our city, and there, often there's the idea that it's a Spartanburg thing, or it's a wherever we're working kind of thing. But what I can tell you is that, when you hear developers all the time, all over the country, they'll say, well, I can't do this or I can't do that. It doesn't work. There's a few different things they mean. So I'll give you guys the behind the scenes. What a developer means when they say, I can't do this or I can't do that is, one, either the zoning, which are the rules and the laws for what can happen on the piece of property, doesn't allow me to do it. Now, that said, the better way to say it is I can't do it right now because zoning can be changed or can be updated. So the zone that Martin mentioned is the current zoning on that property, but zoning changes. And so a developer could request a zoning change, and that takes time and money to do that. Now, the other thing a developer means when they say I can't do something is, if I do that, then I will be able to make the return on my investment that I need to make for it to be profitable for our company. And so, then we immediately say, oh, well, don't be so greedy. And so I think kind of back to what was said earlier about, if the developer is able to do X, Y, and Z that they need to do, then they'll just not do anything, and that's okay for them. And then the building still sits. And yes, it has all the history and the memories of it, but it's in the meantime decaying right before your eyes. And so, how do we figure out how to have a way that the developers can make the profit that they need to make it worth their while, because the land has costs, and the developer, we sometimes forget. A lot of times people talk about developers as sort of like they're bad guys and bad women with bad intentions because they want to make money, or they might make a lot of money doing their development. But the thing about development that's unusual that most people don't realize is most developers have gone bankrupt at least 2 or 3 times in their career because there's huge risk in development. So they put up all the money to buy a piece of property, to build the improvements they need to, and hope that it will work and somebody will take it. So there's some sort of gamble in it at the end of the day. But at when you're looking at the developer, it's just their job, just like any job. So it's like if you started a candy shop or something, they're taking the risk to make candy. Now they're not going to make as much money selling candy as a developer, and so we tend to have more of a soft spot in our heart for them. But and then the city has a limited ability to control what happens in a piece of property. The zoning laws are there, and if the developer is following the zoning law and the city says you can't do it, then the developer says, okay, no problem, we'll see you in court, and they just sue them, and they likely will win, and then they do the development anyway. And so trying to think through, how can the city have more control in what happens to it? And really the best and only way, besides changing the zoning rules, is the proactive approach and really thinking ahead. And that's, as Chris said, why the comp plan is so important, why we're all here at the table today to discuss these things. So I know it's frustrating, and it is for everybody all over the country. And I'm not saying any of this to diminish that frustration or to even say that you're not right. But I just wanted to share some of these things with you, because a lot of times people who don't deal with every in and outs of development or planning or zoning, nearly feel like people are working against them intentionally. And not that there may not be some people who are bad actors at the end of the day. So do like this case study. This is great. It's a good example of something that's fresh on everybody's mind. People are passionate about, so I have no trouble getting you all to talk about it. And so that's helpful. What else? So transparency. Yeah, I think that's, Tamika made a comment about transparency, and I think we'll need to, that's a bigger picture issue that needs to get sorted out for sure. You should be able to talk about anything that's bothering you or concerns you have without having to worry about if there's repercussions or ramifications. Else have some thoughts about anything? You can talk about this project more if you want, or any other projects or needs. Do we need any more, do we need some expensive housing? Do we need some, executive housing, or we want to attract more businesses and companies and things like that? Do we need to make sure their CEOs and owners have a place to live, or do you guys have a good amount of high-end housing?
I think there's a good enough amount of high-end housing in Spartanburg County. I'm not sure about the city.
Yeah, oh, that's a great point. Thanks, Ricky, for mentioning that. I've heard that there's a lot of people who are living in the county that you say, well, why not in the city? And we noticed also in the commuting patterns that I talked about the other night. So many people driving into Spartanburg for work and then driving out, and they don't live there. And so, why are they not living there? We'd have some traffic benefits if they were. Go ahead.
The cost of living tends to be a little bit higher the closer you get to the city. Like I was saying before, you have $1,200 apartments in the city of Spartanburg, and you have $750 apartments along the county in smaller areas, and people just don't feel like we're not Atlanta, we're not Charlotte, right? So nobody wants to pay $1,200 when you can, like I said, you can rent a house with a pool just 6-7 miles up the road. And commuting through Spartanburg is not, bad. So you're not forced to move somewhere because you don't want to deal with traffic. And I think that comes to play with the cost of living. There is no really median cost of living in the city. You either pay high end downtown, or you find a lower income area and pay less, which are still rising to that $750, $800.
Got it. So there's the idea that we hear so much about, and we address in nearly every city we work in, this idea of missing middle, housing that isn't, at the most affordable end of the range, so isn't at the highest end, and being able to figure out, kind of what we need to do to capture some of those people who are making decisions to live just outside of the city or in the county. But then the question is, does that help us? Do we want to bring more people in? You don't have much land in the city to develop. I did notice there's a good number of vacant lots within neighborhoods, but I don't know enough about it. But Tripp, certainly is thinking about it. I'm sure. Do they benefit more from commercial growth or residential growth?
Is there any possibility of annexing any more property into the city? I mean, with the developed, the lots that aren't developed, aren't those supposed to be used for green spaces, or could they be used for green spaces? Because I mean, really, after a while, things start to get too tight in some of the neighborhoods that we have, like on Converse Street. Some people only have the streets to park on. They don't have a driveway because the neighborhoods are older, but then we have ordinances saying that they can't park on the streets. And I've been getting a lot of complaints about that too.
It's such a good point, and sorry, I had to take an emergency phone call, but I'm back. Boy, y'all are hitting a really important set of dynamics here. The job base, the manufacturing jobs that used to be inside the city or adjacent, those are now out. So you have this really unusual commuting pattern that y'all have mentioned, where you have people going out for manufacturing work into the county, and then you have people coming into the city for professional jobs and service jobs, and that inflow outflow is really dynamic. the big picture issue, and I know Chris Story can probably comment on this, is in South Carolina, we are so handcuffed on cities' ability to annex, particularly residential areas, unless it's a large vacant property or a commercial property. And so one of the things I'll certainly be looking at is, that balance of development, redevelopment in a city that's fairly built out, to look at where those opportunities are. But the movement piece is, it's kind of, I don't know how to put this the right way. I didn't expect it to be as dynamic as it was. And then, and it's cited again in other studies. So, our own numbers, but even in the housing market study, it was cited as being fairly dynamic on the outflow inflow. So it impacts traffic, impacts just character and mental, and when your commute time is 20 minutes or 25 minutes, that's just time away from family. So all these are really important things, and I'm still trying to digest everything you're saying and hopefully come up with some good, recommendations with the team.
Yeah. Tamika brought up a good point about amenities earlier, exclusionary amenities. And I'm just thinking through, housing is important, yes, but the idea of neighborhood is in some ways maybe more important socially for people to have that sense of community. And without amenities, not things so specific necessarily as bocce or something like that, but a bigger picture, just neighborhood design, like having neighborhood parks so you can walk to, or playgrounds, or those sorts of things, I think is important. Community gardens, whatever the case may be. I'm hoping on Tony's list there are some of those amenities that people will be looking for. Tony, is that a good place for me to look at that on your list?
I don't have the list with me, but I think Tiger said she's gonna send it to you. I got a lot of background noise going on. I'm out here trying to volunteer while listening.
No, I didn't want you to give me the list right now. I just meant when I do look at that list, will I see some of those amenities on it, or should we throw out some amenities now?
You will see a lot of those amenities on there, but you should be adding them as you go. Because I don't think I've seen community garden on. Yeah, community garden was on there, because I think the grocery store thing was on there too.
There was also a list sent directly to the developer. So the developer is aware that there are asks of the community that the citizens felt would have been better suited for that apartment complex. Because again, it's not about, we understand that the change is going to happen, that there's going to be places coming up in the community, that there is a housing shortage. We got all that, but it's just feeling like being left out of the conversation, not being thought of as even possible occupants. Those are the things that keep coming up. And, I will say the developer has sat down with some of the community members, but that was like after the newspaper articles came out, after the media came out. So it just feels like these conversations should have been had before it got to that point. It shouldn't have had to get to that point. Yeah.
Well, and for what it's worth, this might be something that you consider in the city. Whenever we work, because in addition to working for cities, we do work for developers as well on projects around the country. And it was why I understand some of kind of what they mean when they say this and that and the other. But the issue for us is we never want to have, at the end of the day, a project that we're working on or designing where people are coming up in opposition against it. And we know that the very best way to do that is to bring people to the table before we even start drawing. And so we literally do a Planapalooza process, multi-day event like this, and multiple meetings, and before we start drawing for a private development project. And so I remember one city we were working in years ago, working for the city in that case, and doing kind of a public event, getting people's input about what they want to see for the future of their city. They said, we should do this process, require this process for all new development. Because imagine if you know, day one, step one, you know, somebody's going to buy a piece of property or they're interested even in buying a piece of property. The first thing they do is come talk to the neighbors. Now, that said, the reason why most developers don't do that, there's two reasons. One is they're afraid of they might hear, not like what they hear. And so now they're like, well, we asked people what they wanted and they told us things that we can't do. And so now what do we do? And the other thing is a lot of times that the people who help them, their consultants, aren't good at talking to the community and getting good input and having people be heard and incorporating that, or, you know, don't have that creativity. Kind of like Chauncey said earlier, they don't know how to even incorporate some of the ideas that they hear, even if they could. And so one of the things you all may consider as a city, maybe a recommendation we'll make, is that new development of a certain size has a public process, not after they have come up with their plans, but before they start their plans. But then the citizens have to be willing to, and the neighbors and anybody who wants to participate has to also, you know, understand that, you know, they're gonna invite you to the meeting, to the discussion, to be part of the team, as I've described about this process. And just like with a comprehensive plan, we're going to hear ideas this week that, you know, aren't going to end up in the plan. You know, I work somewhere, you know, they say, oh, we need a space needle. That'll really attract people to our city. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen in Spartanburg or whatever. And that's okay. But other things that people talk to us about, you know, even the same person who said space needle said 4 other things, and they see 3 of them, you know, showing up and they go, okay, cool, I get it. You know, they listen, they heard, and some of my ideas are in there. This is awesome. And so that same process can happen for development projects. And I don't know why developers don't do it. I do know why they don't do it. I wish they would just not be afraid, because people are reasonable when you talk to them, especially when you talk to them at the beginning. Because the first thing you said to me was, it's not we're against the project necessarily, it's the process. And what a silly thing for somebody to have to, you know, be concerned about is the process. You know, if they just done a good process from the beginning, you guys might have been excited about the project, your uncle might have been, and the project may have been better even. And that's the thing we look at. It's not just to ask people what they think so they won't object later. It's like, people have good ideas. They know the land, they live there, they know the neighborhood. Here's things you could build on or whatever, or things to watch out for. So I think that's may be important in the future. So what else? Beth, it looks like you have something.
I have some too with Beth. I can go after Beth.
Great. Oh no, Beth was saying she's sorry she has another appointment. I thought she said another apartment to talk about. Go ahead, say.
Okay, so I was actually going to tag on what you were saying. I had been thinking about the neighborhood characteristics. We haven't heard a lot about. I think we heard some things yesterday when we talked about transportation, but I would like to know more about neighborhood characteristics and people's access to the things that they want, such as or need, such as hospitals, doctors' offices. Also, not just one particular neighborhood, but just as you look across the city, wherever you might live, if you could talk about just kind of some of the neighborhood characteristics that exist and what you would like to see from a neighborhood perspective. And also, if you could talk about connectivity. I'm talking 3 different things. So there's neighborhood characteristics within that, talking about hospitals or urgent care facilities, or just being able to access your doctors, connectivity. Are there areas of the city that you feel like are cut off, or the neighborhood is cut off from being able to access certain things, or it takes them longer to access certain things? And I know, Tamika, yesterday you talked about your uncles, and you talked about them a little bit today, but just the ability of seniors to age in place. And, you know, what are some of the things that you would like to see the city do a better job at? And I'm not calling on you specifically, Tamika, you definitely feel free to answer, but what would help seniors be able to age in place and to stay in their communities?
Some of the things that keeps coming up, particularly with my oldest uncle. So I have 2 uncles that live on South Side, and both have like 11 kids each. So the house is going to be over there for a while. The thing that keeps coming up is, you know, he has to go to Cedar Springs to go to the grocery store. And that's, you know, especially during this pandemic time, that's more time that he has to think about how he's going to be safe between his home and the grocery store and back. He has to be very strategic in planning just to be out, because it's not only just a food desert, but it's a medical desert as well. There's no offices over there where you can get your teeth cleaned. There's no banking. Like, it's just, there's no places if you wanted to take medical care for yourself as far as just mental health care. There's not a whole lot of places where you can go, particularly in that neighborhood, and just relax safely, especially if you're elderly. Like, it's limited. There's no railings. If you, like I said, want to walk unassisted without a cane just for dignity purposes, you can't do that. There's plenty of hills. It's just not, I know that I hear the councilwoman's need for the young professionals, but I'm also thinking of people who have poured into that community for decades. They should not be forgotten when it comes to comprehensive planning. And I oftentimes feel like, unless we're talking about nursing homes or like little senior events, elderly get left out, because they're like, it's almost like, oh, they won't be here, so it doesn't matter. But it absolutely matters, because their quality of life is what I'm concerned about the most, because he's on a fixed budget. So you have to consider what you can do. And there's just not a lot to do to even entertain yourself and enjoy. Like, this is a couple that love traveling. You can't go out to eat in Southside because your food options are limited. And what you do have is considered a food swamp. So where do you go?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a good. Yeah. And, you know, we'll all be seniors hopefully someday too. So it's not even those, you know, we can't forget about the ones that are here now. It's like, we're really selfishly thinking about ourselves one day too. So.
And I drove around last night while it was, you know, dark, because I just wanted to see what the city looked like in the nighttime. And on the east side, everything is lit up. Everything is lit up. Like, I can easily say I would feel comfortable safely walking through neighborhoods like Converse Heights, but you did not see that same lighting situation going on in places like Union Street. Like, even the CVS lighting was different. And this is two different sections of town, same company, but the lighting for these areas are completely separated. It just has a completely different feel to it. And I think I told a friend last night, I said, I feel like at this stage, downtown and Converse Heights are the only two places that you could safely walk at night and feel comfortable.
If I can jump in and just add something, I know I'm city staff, but I also live in the city, so I hope it's okay if I give just general feedback. My grandmother lives in Bogota, which is the capital city of Colombia in South America. And down there, there's no such thing as nursing homes. You and your family remain together until you die. And so generally things are designed for people at all stages of life in the built environment. And something that really impressed me that I just thought was amazing down there is there's super tiny parks, like maybe like 20 by 50 feet. And they are all linked up throughout the entire city. Now, granted, the entire city is a plateau, so it's relatively flat until you get to the mountains. But there's this park system where there might be 5 parks throughout your neighborhood, and they're small, kind of like in Savannah, just less, I guess, squared off and planned. The park system and the green space that's available, it's everywhere, almost like it was just tossed out. And then as people walk around, they're connected by what were cow paths or may still be cow paths. And in some cases, the infrastructure is improved, and there are like exercise facilities for the elderly in those parks and in some of the larger community parks. So my grandmother, to get her exercise, obviously someone has to walk with her, but she goes throughout those parks, goes to like the easier to use elderly exercise stations, and honestly, that's kept her alive for the last couple of years as she started to get more health issues. If she didn't have that, I think her health would have degraded far faster. So something to think about.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. The small spaces, Natalia, we often think about, we need a big neighborhood park, but a lot of times those little small kind of pocket parks are, if they're well designed and so that they're not too tucked away that they don't feel safe, can be really meaningful. I think about, you said you lived in Miami at some point. You think about like all the, you see there's little old men playing chess and dominoes and stuff, you know, at these little tables and things. And it doesn't take a lot of space to do that, but it's, you know, it's an intentional, you know, kind of an area to do. And so thinking about the amenities again that I mentioned earlier, based on Tamika's comment, you know, we should make a list of what are some of those neighborhood appropriate, culturally appropriate types of amenities that people could see in a neighborhood, because, you know, we might find that they're not big, expensive kind of things that are needed all the time, that sometimes it's little small stuff, you know, we need a table to play dominoes at or whatever the case may be, you know.
We have a lot of those small parks here where I live. And yesterday we talked a little bit about green infrastructure. And having worked on a project before, one of the things that people noted was, well, if you're going to bring these rain gardens, we don't want just that entire space to be taken up with this garden that we can't even use. And I happened to be out walking one day and had totally forgot about this project we worked on the design side about 4 years ago, but it was already constructed. And I happened to be going down the street and I was thinking, I think this is the park that we worked on, and it actually had elements that the community wanted. So there were benches as a part of this rain garden. There were benches there. You know, people could, people could see like the rocks and all the different stuff. And then there was learning also with it too. There was an interpretive trail, but this is in one of like DC's little triangle parks. I don't even know what the dimensions of that are, but it's almost like just at an intersection. So it's not anything big, but it was somewhere that community could still gather, or people could come sit and read a book, or just, you know, just to get out your side of your house. There's a bench there, or a couple of benches there, but you're also surrounded in the midst of the city by the elements in this rain garden. So we can think about multi-purpose as we think about solving one issue. How do we help with other issues as well?
Becky, how are we doing on time? We over by like 2 hours.
You're kidding, right?
Like, I think we way over.
This is
that's all right.
This was a 1 hour meeting. We've gone 2 hours.
All right. Hey, we got to do it justice. Anything else? Anything else that you can think of before we go? There's so much to it.
I have one quick
question
that Tripp might be able to answer. There was the statistic about the number of people that come into the city on a daily sort of commute basis. Is there information about the makeup of those people? Like Brian, you asked about enough like top tier housing in the city. I know from a tax revenue standpoint, that must make a big difference if it's a lot of wealthier property owners that are living outside of the city and commuting in. Maybe there is a need for that based off of that statistic.
Yes, Brad, there is a tremendous amount of data that, and you know, for the purposes of time and presentation, we show that one side, but we can actually break down. The census only provides us income data in 3 different tiers. So it doesn't tier it completely out, but we can see whether those in commuting are higher wage earners than those out commuting compared with those who live and work within Spartanburg. We also can see the types of jobs people are commuting out to do versus the types of jobs people are commuting in to do, and the delta between those. So just a hypothetical, and I'll admit I have not had time to dig deeper in it yet, is if people are commuting in, this would just be an assumption, okay? I would imagine people commuting into Spartanburg from out are probably more medical education type jobs, and you know, and service type jobs for the shopping and dining. And then those commuting out are probably more manufacturing, warehousing, you know, the kind of things that exist with the big industries that are outside the city limits. I'll be able to examine that with some degree of certainty. The other thing, sorry, ask a geek question. We can actually look at that change over time too.
Something to note that we haven't had a chance to discuss in this particular meeting, but I think it's just as important. as kind of the affordability gentrification discussion that we've been having, is putting affordable housing in high income neighborhoods or higher income neighborhoods, and how, honestly, how people react to that, or you know, what their thoughts are on that. Because if we want mixed income neighborhoods, it's not just putting higher end or market rate housing in lower income established neighborhoods. It's vice versa as well. Yeah.
And I know we're running out of time, and Tamika just made a comment. You know, one of the things I'm grappling with, Tamika, on the food desert comment, is that according to the data, the city has more grocery store sales than locals can purchase, and so does the county. Now, what it doesn't say is that finer grain of just what kind of grocery it is. Does that make sense? Like, my data doesn't say, you know, it's healthy or whatever, but it does say it's a grocery store. And so I know from being, you know, living in the next county over, that the variety and types of groceries I have access to, you know, in Taylor, South Carolina, you know, I'm a minute away from an Aldi and 5 minutes away from a Lidl, you know, and that gives you options. Whereas if you're in neighborhoods, you don't have that same access in this city or in your city. So I have to take the numbers for what they are, but then also look at the kind of the on the ground reality is that. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question as Jeff is asking, is how the grocery stores were defined, because like I am in the county, but I'm literally like, I can be at Publix in 7 minutes from my house. But the thing is that if I turn left, you know, my options are Family Dollar store, Dollar General, and that's it.
Right.
So if I did not have a vehicle, and having 2 children, I would be screwed trying to get fresh food on a regular basis.
You're absolutely right. So the way my data is defined is that the grocery store is defined the way we all would define a grocery store, which is a supermarket. And so a big box store like Walmart or Costco is going to get categorized as that kind of store. And a convenience store is a convenience store. So like a convenience store won't be called a grocery store. And then Walmart won't be called a grocery store. It'll be called a super center. So we do have to be mindful of trade-off dollars that people are doing. So if you're doing your grocery shopping, now a Walmart market is a grocery store, but a Walmart super center is a super center. So all those are coded out. The issue, I have to be really careful though, because when you do pull data for a city, you naturally have gains in a lot of your sales because the retail does tend to congregate in the city. You do also have retail in the periphery of Spartanburg that's not inside the city limits. So, you know, the Boiling Springs, and then the very unusual boundary line of Westgate Mall being in the city, but everything across Interstate 26 down WOEZL, you know, all that is in the county as you head toward Greer.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things that we have a struggle with, particularly in the neighborhood that we're in now, is everyone that lives in this neighborhood has to go to the city every single day for anything that they need. No one in this neighborhood, with I think the exception of the one house, shops in the county. Everything is in the city, from clothing to food. So people may not be paying property taxes, but they are paying everything else to the city.
I was going to bring up the ADUs. Could that be a part of, like, what's different between the ADU and a tiny house? Because I mean, from my understanding, that's basically what it is, a tiny house in the back of your house.
Yeah, basically a tiny house can be its own standalone on a lot. Accessory dwelling unit means that it is like a secondary structure to another, like there's a bigger building on the site, and accessory basically means that it's like a secondary kind of unit to that. but they can be used interchangeably. Like I've seen some people put a tiny house in the rear of a larger lot where there's a big house up front. And so right now, does the zoning allow for accessory units in the city easily?
Primarily,
Natalie,
no.
or-
No, sorry, I'm driving. There's this outright, it's not forbidden or established, other than a lot of our neighborhoods are zoned single family, so that only allows one unit on the property. Other neighborhoods like South Converse and folks on the south side and some of the denser neighborhoods do allow it, but there's nothing in the ordinance that talks about it. So it's kind of permitted because it's not forbidden. But that said, we do need an ADU aspect to our ordinance or code that lays that out. And I would be interested in some of the neighborhoods that are currently forbidden because of either a single family overlay like Hampton Heights and Commerce Heights, who traditionally had ADUs, are now no longer allowed to construct those. And large swaths of the city are R15 single family, and those are huge lots that could support additional units, but currently, we can't allow those to be built, so we constantly have to tell people, no, sorry, ordinance doesn't allow it there.
I
think
just
that
want to
would be
clarify
great.
too that when I was saying ADU earlier, I meant affordable dwelling unit, not accessory dwelling unit. So in the conversation I was having earlier, I was saying affordable dwelling unit because that's a term that I use, not accessory dwelling unit.
Well, and
Sometimes they can allow it.
all over the country, every city we work in these days, the accessory dwelling unit idea of, a smaller structure in the back or a apartment over a garage or something like that, what people used to do historically, like it was just so normal, of course you would do it. And not only, well, yeah, I'd like to have the extra rental income, but, or to our point earlier, like, yeah, I need my parents to live with me, or, whatever the case may be, as we have intergenerational living going on in the same lot. And I think that, every city we're working in, there, really, it's become more commonplace and more accepted. It used to, because people forgot that we had done that historically. When new neighborhoods were being built in the suburbs, they forgot that you used to do that. And so now it's coming back and people are starting to see the benefits of it. So that's an easy fix to tweak the zoning to make sure that it's clear and you don't have to worry about it. I think that, go ahead. Yeah.
Just I'm gonna, on the broader complex housing policy questions, for those that are really interested in that, a couple episodes ago of our city podcast, which may put you to sleep, but I would, if you're interested in walking out on some of that policy discussion, Christopher and I sort of unpack our the city's recently created housing trust fund, and that touches on a lot of the community change housing policy questions that we were discussing, particularly in the first hour and a half of this call. So it might be worth 30 minutes of your time if you're so motivated.
And for everyone who's on this call, the United Way has agreed to fund and kind of hire a consultant to carry out a housing action plan for the Spartanburg community at large. I think that includes the county. But that data collection will be happening in the upcoming months. So kind of similar to this meeting, more expanded and drilling down on all of these subjects in more detail. So join us for that as well.
I have something real quick too before the meeting ends. I know we've touched on it briefly about with other discussions about there not being as many younger generation people showing up to meetings or putting their opinions in. And hopefully the recent census counts will help guide various direction on I guess types of housing that people are looking for. And I know there's a lot of younger people who are looking more to rent as opposed to buy and are living alone. They would rather have pets than kids, stuff like that. So when thinking about the various types of housing, like personally, I rent. I don't have any interest in the near future of buying a home. I have 2 pets, live alone, don't have much interest in a yard aside from a fenced-in backyard for my dog, but I don't have interest in these larger houses that are towards the edges of the city, the huge plots of land. So the idea of the ADUs are very interesting and appealing to me because I don't need all that space. I just need the amount of space for me and my animals. So hopefully reaching out to people who have a variety of interests as opposed to, like we talked earlier about, making sure that seniors' opinions are also heard, even though they might not be on the technology calls and stuff like that. So hopefully there's some representation at CC Woodson, the in-person events for that. So
yeah, well, you know, somebody mentioned earlier the idea that not everybody is has the ability to, or even the desire to move into ownership as a thing. We were talking about it in the context of people who, you know, have the need for affordable housing. But, you know, post-recession, you know, all the heads were renting is the new home ownership. You know, people are making the choice, like, I don't want to be tied down. I don't want to have to, you know, own a house and worry about all of that. I want to be able to rent. It makes me flexible. I can move, you know, even people who could easily afford to buy a house. And so it's kind of a unique time today because people, I always just look for these commonalities when people in different income levels have the same, you know, circumstance, you know, and so now you're solving problems that you know, people with various different backgrounds or circumstances are having the same kind of issues. And so it's kind of neat to see when that happens. One other thing about ADUs before we move on, and I see Marshall has a hand up. There's the idea of, it's called gentle density. So you're starting to densify a place or a neighborhood, not gentrify, it's a densify, just to be clear, to densify a neighborhood without having it feel like it's more dense than before. And so the idea of an accessory dwelling unit, you know, something that's tucked away behind the main house, when you walk down the street or drive down the street, you feel the house that was there. And now you have a whole nother, you know, person or a couple of people that are living on that same lot. And so you don't feel like you're making a lot of density. And one of the other things we're seeing a lot of cities wanting to explore in their zoning when we do zoning rewrites is doing away with zoning areas, zoning districts that only allow detached single family houses, so that you can, you know, say, well, that's one thing, and we have a lot of that in the city. But if we want to, you know, create more affordability, we're going to need a larger number of units. So our supply is increased, and you also have a greater number of types of housing. So the price points are lower in some of those. Go ahead, Marshall. Oh, can't hear you again. I think you're the same issues back that we had before.
How about now?
There we go. You're good.
Excellent. Sorry, I was on the double mute. I just wanted to add or kind of put out the concept of kind of building homeowners. I know the city got a grant maybe from Bank of America when the new TK Gregg opens for kind of a financial planning to help develop homeowners. Some of the housing and maybe the interest in getting some of the neighborhoods to be invested. I know when I became a homeowner, suddenly things became more applicable to me, or I paid more attention to things. And so the concept of building homeowners, or building the people who need the housing. We have a Cleveland Academy. We have a lot of USC Upstate. We have like 8 universities in the city. You know, we're training the best citizen. You know, the education, we're keeping them here. Hopefully now they have a job that pays over $15 an hour that allows them to rent affordably in the city. And then, you know, providing education and incentives for them to be first-time home buyers and stay in the city and keep kind of building economically. but also investing in, they've always lived here, or, you know, they see that that's something that's positive for them to continue doing.
Great, thank you. All right, so I will go ahead and wrap us up here because I know some people are like, oh, I can't go because I don't want a moment of the action, or I don't want to miss a thought or idea, and all, so they feel stuck. And so you know, I hate to do it. I hate to cut it off because the conversation is so important. But just want to make sure people can get to what they need to do today. But we'll be around. We have the open studio time, or, you know, it's all day from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, I think. You can drop in. There's always somebody on the Zoom line waiting to greet you. And so if you have a thought later on this afternoon and you forget, or that you didn't think of now, feel free to jump on there and tell us. Or if there's something you just didn't feel, you know, some people just don't like group settings. So if you just want to talk to somebody one-on-one, that's great too. Take advantage of that opportunity. There's another meeting later on this afternoon at 2 o'clock Eastern, and it is called What Makes Spartanburg? Arts, Culture, History, and Heritage. And that's a fun one. That can get really rich and robust, and that's the meeting that really helps to make sure we're including things that are honoring the essence of Spartanburg, what makes you unique. So please don't miss that one if you have time, and bring people with you. You know, invite people to participate. So thank you so much for all of your input and your patience with us, not knowing everything about the city or circumstances. It's been very educational, and we hope to see you again this afternoon.
Don't forget about the drawing.
Oh, the drawing. Oh, good. I almost hit end. Woo, that was close. Yeah, we got the drawing. Who's going to win the prizes?
Are we ready?
Yeah.
First person is Beth Rutherford.
All right, Beth.
Second person is Brad Steinecke.
No, I won another one, so I'm gonna pass on that one.
Okay, let me draw again. Jeff Domland.
Jeff.
Yep.
Yeah, hi. I'm not comfortable accepting it. Why don't you draw for someone else?
All right, we'll draw again.
So hard to give away a prize.
Tamika Thompson.
Ah, I knew it, finally.
Wondering when it was gonna be her time.
Tamika, for those who haven't been on some other meetings, Tamika's I think you may have been at every meeting and had the most input, so it's about time.
Well, I guess I shouldn't decline it then.
No, you have earned it.
So we got Beth Rutherford and Tamika Thompson.
Yes.
Yay.
All right. Good. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for participating. I really appreciate it. We'll talk to you all this afternoon.